While scanning the restaurant for the client I was supposed to meet, I saw my ex-wife, Susan, with a slightly overweight middle. He was a bit overweight, but he used to be in shape. Susan was sitting next to him, looking pretty happy. He looked like he was rolling in it. I got flashbacks of us standing in the foyer. It was like it was yesterday, even though it was 3 years since we got divorced. I found myself feeling all the feels. The older guy was clearly in good shape at one point, but you could tell he'd been messing around a bit too much. He was sitting there looking pretty content, and he looked like he had a lot of money. As I was standing there, I remembered everything that had happened to us, even though it had been 3 years since we got divorced. I felt all the feelings again, like I did right then. I found myself watching from a distance, not with her. But as things went down, she got what she wanted. My problem started when I went to Albany for a client meeting and decided to stay the night to avoid a long drive. My plans got messed up when, after about an hour, the client called and said his fender was broken, even though it wasn't damaged, and he was sorry. I was just sitting there, watching from a distance, not with her. But as things went down, her wishes came true. My problem started when I went to Albany for a client meeting and decided to stay the night to avoid a long drive home. My plans got messed up when, about an hour into the trip, the client called and said his fender was broken, even though it wasn't damaged. He said he was sorry for the late cancellation and that he was sorry it was an inconvenience, but that we could just schedule something else. I felt like I wasn't prepared for the extra 2 hours of driving ahead, so I promised to do my best. I'm planning to go home for a romantic dinner with my wife, 90 minutes later. When I finally got home, the first thing I saw was I was a bit surprised to see 3 unfamiliar cars parked in the driveway. My wife often invited her friends over when I was away, so I didn't think much of it. I parked on the street and went into the house, assuming everything was normal. But when I saw 4 sets of clothes on the living room floor, I knew something was off. As I stood there, I started to feel a bit uneasy. I saw 3 unfamiliar cars in the driveway, and since my wife often had friends over when I was away, I didn't think much of it. I parked on the street and went into the house, thinking everything was normal. But when I saw 4 sets of clothes on the living room floor, I knew something was wrong. As I stood there, I had a gut-wrenching realization. My wife's passionate cry wasn't a call for help, it was a familiar plea for more intense love. My heart sank as I grasped the truth, my wife was having an affair. Despite my reluctance, I knew I had to face the reality upstairs. When I reached the top of the stairs, I heard my wife screaming. I looked around the bedroom door, and I saw 3 men. I didn't know 2 of them, but the third was. I couldn't believe it. It was obviously Jeff Davis, my boss from work, and he was having my wife do all these things with him. I was so disgusted that he was praising her and saying how great she was with his business clients. It was so messed up to realize that this guy was taking advantage of my wife just to get ahead in his career. All 3 of them treated her like some kind of object to be used for sex, using rude language and acting like she didn't matter. Seeing her being treated so differently from the woman I knew during our 10 years of marriage, I couldn't help but I agreed with Jeff's choice of derogatory label for her. Quietly, I retreated downstairs, seeking refuge in my office and retrieving my digital video camera. I found it still had some battery life, with an old holiday cassette inside and space for recording. I aimed to document my wife's actions for legal purposes. Rather than creating some illicit spectacle, I set up the camera at the bedroom door and captured footage of my wife's face and the others involved. They managed to endure only 5-10 minutes of the ordeal before my emotions hit me hard. While some might get turned on by this scene, it just made me feel sad and really betrayed. I felt totally down, so I went to my office to collect my thoughts. I got my gun from the safe and took the safety off, even though I'm not into violence. But I couldn't shake this feeling that I had to stand up for myself if things got worse. I went into the living room and took the car keys and wallets from the pants that were thrown across the floor. The tires of all the cars parked outside, including Sue's, were in the way. I had a sinister grin on my face as I came up with a plan, sure it would work if Sue took her cell phone. I saw it on the bedside table while I was recording. I got my camera ready, got into a good spot behind the stairs, and dialed her number. After a few times when she didn't pick up, the silence in the house showed that she had told the others to stay quiet. Sue, breathing heavily, asked, "Hey, Bobby, how's Albany?" "The faint?" The men in the room were laughing. "You seem winded. Are you okay?" I pretended to be concerned. "Yes, I had to hurry upstairs for my phone call." She replied quickly, composing herself. "My client cancelled, so I'll be home soon. I'm interested in dinner." I asked calmly, though internally I felt more agitated than ever. "Heading home now?" She asked anxiously. "Sounds good. Just need to get ready. Babe, see you." She hurriedly replied before ending the call abruptly, leaving me with a knowing smile, aware of what was about to unfold in just a minute. As I thought, for completely naked people started coming down the stairs into the living room. The men quickly got dressed, and Sue also hurriedly got herself together. They all rushed out. Sue put on shoes and a jacket, looking outside, hoping they'd leave before she did. If she'd been less excited, she might have noticed my car parked on the street. The men all started shouting at her at the same time, which made Sue step onto the porch to listen. At that exact moment, I slammed the front door shut, and 4 completely undressed people started coming down the stairs into the living room, as I'd thought they would. The men quickly got dressed, and Sue also hurriedly got herself together. They all rushed out. Sue put on shoes and a jacket, glancing outside, hoping they'd leave before she did. Had she been less excited, she might have noticed my car parked on the street. The men all started shouting at her at the same time, which made Sue step onto the porch to listen. At that exact moment, I slammed the front door shut and locked it. My wife saw my face as I closed the door, trying to talk to her through the side window. She was crying and begging me to listen. The other men came back to my porch and banged on the front door, showing they wanted their stuff. I realized what they wanted to do. I called the police and said I was trying to break in. The dispatcher told me a neighbor had already called, giving my name and address. I waited for the police, which came quickly, just 2 minutes. My wife saw my face when I closed the door. She was trying to talk to me through the side window. She was crying and begging me to listen. The other men came back to my porch and started banging on the front door. They wanted their stuff. I realized what was going on and called the police. The dispatcher told me that a neighbor had already called and gave my name and address. The police came really quickly, like 2 minutes later. After the police talked to my wife, I went over to the 2 officers at the scene. I told them that the men had treated my wife badly. I asked them to arrest the men. This made the men start yelling. They said that they had been invited and that my wife had said it was okay. They said that she hadn't been treated badly. Everyone, including me, turned to look at Sue. She didn't make eye contact. She said in a quiet voice that she was sorry, but she had invited the men into the house and had been with them. After the cops questioned my wife, I went over to the 2 officers at the scene and told them that the men had treated my wife badly. I asked them to arrest the men, which made them all shout and start yelling that they had been invited and that she had agreed to it. Everyone, including me, turned to Sue, waiting for her to say something. She looked away and said in a quiet voice, sounding ashamed, that she had invited the men into the house and had been close with them, but that it wasn't maltreatment. She said she had done it on her own. The men seemed happy to not have to deal with maltreatment charges. Soon after, 2 more police cars arrived and they wrote down everyone's names for their report. The senior officer then talked to me, saying that since my wife invited the men and they were all over 18 years old, there wasn't much legal that could be done. He suggested something like counseling. Looking at my wife with a mean look, I told the police I called a taxi and told them Mrs. Thomas wasn't allowed back at the house that evening. One of the men called a taxi after finding their tires were flat. They also tried to accuse me of stealing their stuff, but I denied it to the police. I walked back to the porch, where Sue was with them until the taxi got there. I stood on the porch, my eyes flashing with anger. Despite my fury, my wife bravely approached me, unaware of my rage and the gun on my person. She may have fled had she knew Bobby. "I'm really sorry." She tried to say something, but I quickly interrupted. "You've broken my heart, and I'll never forgive you." Jeff called you a strumpet, and honestly, I think it fits from now on. I'll refer to you as such and won't use your rewrite the text in a casual tone that's appropriate for a business context. I'm sorry, but she knew Bobby. I cut her off when she tried to speak. You've hurt my feelings, and I'll never forgive you. Jeff called you a strumpet, and honestly, I think it's fitting. From now on, I'll refer to you as such and won't use your real name again. If you ever need to communicate with me, do so through Tad. With those final words, I retreated into the house, locking the door behind me. She hurried back to the group, crying. Jeff moved to console her, but she rebuffed his attempts. Embrace, which oddly brought me some solace. However, my fleeting satisfaction soon waned. Upon returning to my bedroom, the scent of lemon pervaded the air, further incensing me. I erupted in fury, ransacking the entire room, hauling the mattress and hurling it onto the front lawn. Retrieving my toolbox from the garage, I disassembled the bed and tossed its pieces outside. Along with the mattress returning to the bedroom, I seized Sue's cell phone from the floor, scrolling through her contacts and messages. Predictably, I discovered I found repugnant emails, photos, and even videos of unfamiliar men having sex with her. Looking at the images, it was clear she knew them. I laughed bitterly at my former assistant, who realized those days were long gone. I carried all the boxes from our bedroom downstairs and put their contents in separate piles on the front lawn. I started purging her belongings from the guest room and found an unexpected thing, moving each dresser drawer outside as I had done with the bedroom items. I hit a wall with the last bottom drawer, which was full of anger. I yanked it, and it made a telltale crack. The drawer finally opened, and there were 7 or 8 DVDs hidden under it. I accidentally broke one of the plastic cases, but luckily the drive was fine. My heart dropped again when I looked at the discs. I didn't think I could feel any worse, but I did. When I got downstairs, I looked at the titles on the discs, and it just made me more upset. In the living room, I set everything up on the shelves so I could take a closer look. The first disc showed Sue hanging out with her good friend Sarah at Sarah's place. Sue was often there to help out at Sarah's get-togethers in Avon, which were usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It looked like they were doing some pretty intimate stuff with different people. I put everything on the shelves in the living room to take a closer look. The first disc showed Sue with her close friend Sarah at Sarah's house. Sue often helped out at Sarah's gatherings in Avon, which were usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It seemed like they did activities together with different people at her house. As I watched the footage for several hours, tears welled up, and I only stopped when I got to the last 2 discs. The first one showed Sue with her tennis instructor, whom I funded. She went to lessons every Saturday, but she was too tired for closeness later that night, which I now understood. The second disc, I watched the footage for a few hours, and it was pretty emotional. I got a little choked up when I saw the first disc, which was of Sue and her tennis instructor. I paid for her to take lessons every Saturday, but she was always too tired to have any kind of relationship with me after class. That's when I started to suspect something was going on. The second disc was even more shocking. It showed Sue having relationships at work, like in the boardroom with her boss, Jeff, and his boss, Bill Evans. Bill was a big shot in the community. He was always in the papers because of his charity work. But now I saw that he was messing with my wife, too. Sue found out that I was having an affair with her boss, Jeff, and his superior, Bill Evans. Bill was a big shot in the community, always in the news for his charity work. Now I saw that he was messing with my wife, too. I got a big envelope, put a cell phone, some discs, and a cassette tape in it. I was planning to give the whole envelope to my lawyer, Ted, and tell him everything. Ted was a friend of mine for a long time, and I trusted him with everything. He was one of only 2 people I really trusted. I took out a big envelope, put my phone, the discs, and a cassette tape I'd recorded earlier in it, and then I was planning to give the whole thing to my lawyer and confidant, Ted. He was one of only 2 people I really trusted. At that moment, I looked at Sue's computer on the desk. I turned it on and started making copies of every file, email, photo, and video onto external drives. It took about an hour to finish. Then I settled down to look through my wife's digital archives. Among the videos were scenes that reminded me of I powered up Sue's computer and started copying everything on it to external drives. It took about an hour, and then I started going through my wife's digital files. I found some videos that looked like the ones on the CDs I had found before. I also found some explicit images, the kind you usually see on adult websites. When I looked into it more, I found a bunch of emails from the last 6 months. Even though she tried to hide them with fake file names, I found messages between her, Jeff, and a few others. I also found some pretty explicit stuff, usually found on adult websites. I dug a bit deeper and found a bunch of emails from the last 6 months. She tried to hide them by using file names that were kinda misleading, but I found emails between her and Jeff, and also with other men. I had ignored them until one of them really got to me. I thought about using my weapon, but then I figured she wasn't worth it. I had to stay strong. The email that really hit me was from Sue to Sarah, where she asked why she hadn't left May had put all the men in conversations with Sarah from last week out of my mind until one of them almost destroyed me. I even thought about using my weapon, but then I realized she wasn't worth it. I had to stay strong. The only email that affected me this deeply was from Sue to Sarah. Sarah asked why she hadn't left me to be single again and asked Sue to describe her ideal future husband. Here's how she responded: Sarah, I have no interest in him anymore. Bobby is faithful, but he's foolish. I fear he'll soon find out about my secret lifestyle. He's not entirely clueless, but love blinds him. Lately, he's been gaining weight, and his expanding belly is off the charts. Sue was asked to describe her ideal future husband, and she responded with the following. I have no interest in Bobby anymore. He's faithful, but he's also foolish. I fear he'll soon find out about my secret lifestyle. He's not entirely clueless, but love blinds him lately, he's been gaining weight, and his expanding belly is off. Comparing him to other men, he's lacking. I also detest beards and mustaches, which make him appear somewhat repulsive. I once loved him deeply, but the excitement of recent years is too enticing to give up. His lawyer best friend could pose problems if he gets involved. Jeff and Bill at work hint at promotions and perks with suggestive undertones. I laugh. I also want a house and a car. If I play my cards right, I could also get alimony each month. I'm also looking forward to our Tuesday party, if I recover from my tennis injury. Tony is impressive. Did I receive last Thursday's video? It was my first time with so many men at once. As for my dream man, he must be rich, loyal, compliant, and not too bright. He must cater to my every whim and still ask which one I chuckle. I'm indifferent about the bedroom, as long as there's money involved. I laugh. I can fulfill my needs elsewhere. Sometimes it feels too easy. Damn, Bobby's home now. Got to go, see you on Tuesday. Call me Sue. I read this letter repeatedly. Its words disgusting, and the last few years deeply. He's too bright. He must cater to my every whim and still ask which one I like. I'm indifferent about the bedroom as long as there's money involved. I laugh. I can fulfill my needs elsewhere. Sometimes it feels too easy. Damn, Bobby's home now. Got to go, see you on Tuesday. Call me Sue. I read this letter repeatedly. Its words disgust me, and the last few years have deeply hurt me. Meditated, she truly feels this way about me. Was I so blind to my love that she cheated on me for over 2 years? Afterward, I retired to bed and fell asleep on the sofa. The next morning, plagued by restless sleep, I called in sick to work. I reached out to my close friend and lawyer, Ted Worth. Mary, Ted's secretary, answered the phone. I'd known her almost as long as Ted. I was hurt. She really felt this way about me. Was I so blind to my love that I cheated on her for over 2 years? I retired to bed and fell asleep on the sofa the next morning. I was restless. I called in sick to work. I reached out to my close friend and lawyer, Ted Worth. Mary, Ted's secretary, answered the phone. I'd known her almost as long as Ted. I urgently requested a meeting, but she informed me that he'd be tied up in court all day. Mary informed Ted that I needed to meet him in his office in an hour. If he starts bothering you with nonsense, bring up Tammy Brown's name. That'll grab his attention. See you in an hour, I said before ending the call. I began getting dressed when my phone rang. I was reluctant to. I asked for a meeting with her ASAP, but she said he'd be busy in court all day. Mary told Ted that I need to meet him in his office in an hour. If he starts bothering you with nonsense, mention Tammy Brown's name. That'll grab his attention. See you in an hour, I said, ending the call quickly. I started getting dressed when my phone rang. He didn't want to talk to Sue, so I checked the caller ID. It was an unknown number, so I answered, thinking it might be Ted returning my call. Hello, Mr. Thomas. This is Bill Evans from Susan's office. If possible, I'd like to discuss the events from last evening at your house. Could we meet today in my office to clarify the situation for all involved? I'm not sure if he was aware of the video. There was footage of him with my wife at his workplace. I knew he was worried about keeping Jeff Davis's key clients. My wife and Jeff were valuable assets to him, and he likely didn't want to lose them. He was probably also worried about negative publicity for his company and himself. Mr. Evans, I have an important meeting this morning, but I'll call you back. I had footage of him with my wife at his workplace. I knew he was worried about keeping Jeff Davis's key clients. My wife and Jeff were valuable assets to him, and he didn't want to lose them. He was also probably worried about negative publicity for his company and himself. Mr. Evans, I have an important meeting this morning, but I'll call you back on this number before noon to arrange something for today, I assured him calmly. I conveyed it as though he was reasoning with me. He was in for a surprise. As I stepped out, I glimpsed what resembled a bizarre yard sale. The broken bed, and Sue's clothes were still strewn about. An elderly neighbor waved, wearing a curious expression. I knew I'd become the talk of the town. I called on this number before noon to arrange something for today, I assured him calmly, explaining it to him as though he was reasoning with me. He was in for a surprise. As I stepped out, I glimpsed what resembled a bizarre yard sale. The broken bed, and Sue's clothes were still strewn about. An elderly neighbor waved, wearing a curious expression. I knew I'd become the talk of the neighborhood. As they say in the news, it was a suburb sensation in the city center. I grabbed a bite to eat before heading straight to Ted's office. Mary brewed a cup of coffee for me, lots of cream, no sugar. We had a long history together. Holy crap, Bobby. I don't know what you've got on Tad, but I mentioned his name, and he instructed me to clear his schedule. For today, I could use a month off, she quipped. If you want to know who Tammy Brown is, you'll have to ask Ted. By the way, where is he? I asked. He'll be here right away, he said. He needed to reschedule his meeting with the judge for today's court hearing. Just then, he walked in, she informed me. Tammy Brown, you must be in big trouble. Hey, for today, I could really use a break. You know me, I'm here for you, she said with a playful smile. So, Tammy, who exactly is this Ted guy? I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. Oh, he's just a friend. He's on his way here. He had to change his plans with the judge for today's court hearing. Oh, really? I replied, surprised. So, Tammy, you're telling me you mentioned that name to me? Yeah, well, don't go blabbing about that to anyone, okay? Let's just talk in the office. Sure, I'll make sure not to mention your name to anyone, Tad quickly interjected. I took a sip of my coffee and he shut the door, making sure we had some privacy. I started to explain what had happened the night before and told him about the evidence I had gathered about Sue's new lifestyle. Then, I handed him an envelope with all the info. Finally, he spoke. He listened to my story without interruption. I could see the legal gears turning in his head as he processed the events from the night before. I also told him about Bill Evans's request for a meeting today. Well, Bobby, as they say, let's prioritize. I've known you for a long time, and I understand you're devastated. Is there any? He listened to my story, no interruptions, no distractions. I could tell he was thinking about it, processing everything that had happened the night before. I also told him about Bill Evans's request for a meeting today. Bobby, let's be real here. I've known you for a while, and I know you're heartbroken. Is there any chance you can get back together with Sue? He asked Ted if it was Katie, your wife, and if you had found those videos and emails. You'd leave her in an instant. I want a divorce, but I also want to cause some serious damage. I'm not going to just roll over and take this betrayal. I confessed, okay, first we'll sue Tony in the tennis club. Sarah is off the table, as she's just a friend. Sue's workplace, though, is a different story. Second, we'll sue the 2 clients and their companies who were at your house. We'll also go after Jeff, Davis, Bill, Evans, and their associates. He warned that things might get worse before they get better, but Ted told me not to worry. I don't care. Even if I have to resort to physical confrontation, I'm going to make these people pay. They'll pay for what they did through Sue. I said, angry, okay, Bobby, tell me what Bill Evans wanted, and we'll go from there. Ted told me we'd looked at a few options, and I liked the last one, a direct attack on Sue's workplace. I had leverage because of the video evidence of Davis, Evans, and Sue in their boardroom. Ted, he explained that Sue's bosses influenced her position, which could lead to serious legal consequences. I liked the sound of it. Ted also hinted that once Bill Evans saw the evidence, he'd change his stance, probably leading to a settlement offer. If it's less than $2 million, he can forget it. I told Ted, make it $2 million. $5 million. I've seen your legal bills before, Ted. I joked, come over tonight at 7:00 p.m. Katie will whip up a fantastic dinner for us. You could use a break from home. I insisted. I promptly scheduled an appointment with Bill Evans for 2 p.m. After that, Mary went into the office and said, Ted, they're calling you online. She told him, Mary, I told you no calls. He got visibly annoyed and said, sorry, Ted, but this is Susan. She wants to talk to you, and I thought you might want to answer. Mary kept going, sorry, Mary. It's going to be a long day, and it's just getting started. Does she know Bobby is here? He inquired, not that I know. Ted replied, tell her I'll talk to her in a minute. He said more calmly as Mary she was quick to get out to the reception area. I bet she's already figured out that her cell phone, computer, and all her DVDs are missing. I bet she was furious that I dumped all her stuff on the front lawn, along with our bed. I told him, wow, you really had a busy evening. Let me handle this conversation, and please don't intervene as your lawyer. I need to clarify a few things right now. He told me, I started to overhear I overheard a little bit of a side conversation, but I could almost tell what she was saying to Ted without hearing her words. Hi, Susan. This is Ted. Yes, I already spoke to him. Bobby's a stand-up guy and my friend. I thought you of all people would have his back instead of betraying him. No excuses, Sue. I'm not in the mood. Yes, Sue, I'll talk to him, but you've shattered a man who was always faithful and deeply loved you. I doubt he cares about your opinion. My advice is to get yourself a good lawyer, you'll need one. Yes, Bill Evans scheduled an appointment for 2 p.m. I don't think you should go, but listen to me, Sue. If you even try to drop outside the office door, I'll tell Bobby to leave, and things will get worse. It's better to wait and stay calm today. I know he put your stuff out on the lawn, but just as you can invite strangers into your bedroom, he can take your things out of the house. Frankly, I'm surprised he didn't get violent last night. He was armed, but for self-defense. For defensive purposes, remember he thought you were in danger of an assault. It's in the police report. I can't say for sure, but if it were my Katie, I'd probably be in custody right now. I think he was just angry, considering the circumstances regarding your computer, cell phone, and any other missing items. You'll need to speak to the he thought you were in danger of an assault, and that's why he did what he did. It's in the police report. I'm not sure, but if it were my Katie, I'd probably be in custody right now. I think he was angry, given the circumstances regarding your computer, cell phone, and any other missing items. You'll need to speak to the co-owner of the house. Maybe he left them on the lawn, along with your clothes, and someone took them. I've handled all the escrow paperwork for the house, and you both have equal rights. You can exercise these rights however you want. Ted responded that he would inform him immediately and advised Sue sternly to stay where she was and let Bobby stay in the house until things were resolved, as it wasn't safe for her to be there with him at the moment. He then told Sue not to push it and expressed his temptation to. He told her to stick around with Sarah and said he'd be in touch. He asked her lawyer to hit him up once they'd picked a lawyer. Tears wouldn't change Ted's mind now. He was Bobby's lawyer and his friend. He said her tears wouldn't make him change his mind, and that he could be ruthless when needed, which seemed to be one of those times. He said he was sorry that she'd see a side of him that only his enemies saw. He warned her that she wouldn't like it. Ted ended by telling Sue to stay away from Bobby and stay in her office for now, as he didn't want anything to do with her. Glancing up at me, Ted asked if I understood most of the conversation. His tone was sad. I told my friend that I did understand most of it, and that I wanted to face her and tell her how I really feel, but I said that I didn't think I could handle seeing her again, at least not yet. Bobby said he had a couple of requests for me, and he sounded really serious. I'm feeling pretty positive and optimistic right now. Could you hand me those tapes? I'd like to take them out of the envelope. I need to get the videotapes from the envelope from the night before. I'm talking about the ones with Tony at the tennis club and the footage of Sue with Mr. Davis and Mr. Evans in her office. After I hand him the tapes, he tells me to invite Mary to lunch. I give him a puzzled look, and he looks puzzled back. I think it's best if I review them myself to spare you any more distress before our meeting at 2 p.m. Hey, I don't think you'd get anything out of watching this stuff right now. I don't want you to be upset before our meeting with Bill E.V. I told him he was wise and thanked him before sharing the good news with Mary. She jokingly said I should take her to a fancy restaurant if Ted was paying. We both laughed and left. Mary was a great dining companion, and for the next also, I don't think you'd find it useful to watch this content right now. I don't want you to be upset before our meeting with Bill E.V. I acknowledged his wisdom and thanked him before sharing the good news with Mary. She jokingly suggested I take her to an upscale restaurant if Ted was paying. We both laughed and left. Mary was an excellent dining companion, and for the next hour, she helped me forget my troubles. Upon our return, we heard Ted cheering as we entered the office. He was in high spirits, doing a little victory dance at his desk. These recordings are a game changer, Bobby. I can't believe it, he exclaimed. My expression turned bittersweet, and I think he finally grasped why. Oh, Bobby, I'm truly sorry I didn't acknowledge the significance of these videos. I know Sue's actions have after she helped me forget my troubles. We heard Ted cheering when we returned to the office. He was in high spirits, doing a little victory dance at his desk. These recordings are a game changer, Bobby. I can't believe it, he exclaimed. My expression turned bittersweet, and I think he finally grasped why. Bobby, I'm truly sorry I didn't acknowledge the significance of these videos. I know Sue's actions have deeply hurt you. I was just excited about what I uncovered. He apologized sincerely. Come over here. I need your eyes on something. Ted beckoned me, and I complied, positioning myself behind him to view his screen. Did you watch the entire video Tony shot at the tennis club with Sue? He inquired. No, I only managed to skim through some of it last night. It was tough to stomach without feeling the urge to lash out. I was really hurt by what I found out. I was just excited about it, you know. He apologized, and then he was like, hey, Bobby, come here. I need you to see this. So I went over there, and he was showing me something on his screen. Did you watch the whole video that Tony shot at the tennis club with Sue? I was like, nah, I only watched a little bit of it last night. It was kinda hard to watch, you know. I felt like I wanted to lash out at some point. He was like, well, brace yourself, because at the end, after Tony and Sue are done, they kind of attract a small crowd in the men's locker room. And he was right. It was the tennis club's locker room. I hate to say it, but she let the other guys who were watching join in after Tony. I'm not saying this to upset you, but to shed light on this guy right here. Ted explained, pointing at the screen on his desk. The guy he was talking about was. I told him, I'll be honest with you. Well, brace yourself. After Tony and Sue finish, they attract a small crowd in the men's locker room. Yes, the tennis club's locker room. I hate to say it, but she let the other men who were watching join in after Tony. I am not telling you this to upset you, but to shed light on this guy right here. Ted explained, pointing at the screen on his desk. The individual he was indicating was an older man. DML treatment. It in a towel with his long gray hair and a walrus-like mustache. He asked if I recognized him. Ted hit play on the video, and I saw him discard the towel, revealing a substantial package. Any man would boast about the issue. He went straight to my wife and engaged in coition with her. The next moment, she was surrounded by 5 more men eagerly awaiting their turn. I told Ted, I have no clue who this guy is, but I assume you do. He replied, trying to keep it together. Bobby, this is ammo for our meeting today at the tennis club at 16 Nasi. He was clearly excited as he explained his strategy. I grinned when I heard his plan. Besides being my friend, Ted was an exceptional lawyer. I was relieved to have him on my side this time we left his office. I told Ted, I have no clue who this guy is, but I guess you know. He replied, this is info for our meeting today at the tennis club at 16 Nasi. He sounded excited when he explained his strategy. I grinned when I heard his plan. Besides being my friend, Ted was an exceptional lawyer. I was relieved to have him on my side this time. We left his office and went downtown. We had a portable DVD player, some printed photographs, and legal envelopes. We went to Bill Evans's office on the top floor, and Sue's office was 1 floor below. After waiting in the reception area, we were finally ushered into Mr. Evans's fancy office. Just before entering, I felt like someone was watching me from the hallway. I glanced over. I went to downtown with a portable DVD player, some printed photos, and legal envelopes. When we got to Sue's building, we went to Bill Evans's office on the top floor. Sue's office was on the floor below. After waiting in the reception area, we were finally shown into Mr. Evans's fancy office. Just before entering, I felt like someone was watching me from the hallway. I looked in that direction and saw the woman, but she disappeared around the corner. I thought, who is that? I was glad I wouldn't have to deal with her today. We went into Bill's office, which was full of fancy furniture, plaques, and photos of him with important people. I thought, had he ever brought Sue here? At that moment, I really disliked Mr. Evans. I caught a glimpse of the woman before she disappeared around the corner. I thought to myself, guess who? I was relieved I wouldn't have to confront her today. We stepped into Bill's office, which was full of fancy furniture, plaques, and photos of him with important people. I thought, had he ever brought Sue here? My disdain for Mr. Evans increased even more. I introduced Ted and took the lead in the conversation. Hello, Mr. Evans. This is my friend Ted, who'll be joining us for the meeting you scheduled today, I told Bill as we shook hands. Mr. Thomas, Bob, I thought this was meant to be a private meeting between you and me. Well, I decided to bring Ted along. Anything you have to say to me, you can say to him as well. I said, hello, Mr. Evans, this is my friend Ted, who'll be joining us for the meeting you scheduled today. I told Bill as we shook hands. Mr. Thomas, Bob, I thought this was meant to be a private meeting between you and me. Mr. Evans, well, I decided to bring Ted along. Anything you have to say to me, you can say to him as well. I firmly, without opening it up for discussion, accepted Ted's presence and directed his remarks solely at me, disregarding Ted. This brought a smile to Ted's face. I anticipated what was coming next, but I let Mr. Evans speak first before we burst his bubble. Bob, may I call you Bob? Bill asked. Absolutely no issues. In fact, I thought it might be beneficial to have Jeff Davis present at this meeting. I'm not. He was like, I'm not opening it up for discussion. Ted's here, but I'm only talking to you. Ted got a smile out of that. I figured out what was coming next, but I let Mr. Evans speak first before we burst his bubble. Bob, can I call you Bob? Bill, no problem. I thought it might be good to have Jeff Davis there too. I'm not sure if it's possible, but it concerns him as well. I'll tell Mr. Evans. After a quick pause, he pressed the intercom button. Julie, tell Jeff I need him in my office right away. Tell him to drop everything and come here. I understand. Jeff will be here soon. In the meantime, I want to apologize for the trouble caused by Jeff and Sue in your life. I know last night. Sure, if it's doable, but it concerns him too. I told Mr. Evans after a quick pause. He pressed the intercom button. Julie told Jeff that I need him in my office right away. Tell him to drop everything and come here immediately. I understand. Jeff will be here soon. In the meantime, I want to say I'm really sorry for the trouble caused by Jeff and Sue in your life. I know last night must have been awful, but if we work together, we might be able to find a solution that benefits everyone. Bill expressed optimistically. What exactly do you mean, Mr. Evans? I'm waiting for Jeff to arrive. I genuinely care about your wife, Sue. Bill began, but was interrupted by Jeff's entrance. He hesitated for a moment, appearing as though he might turn and leave, but Bill told him to take a seat, reluctantly. Bill, I think we all know what happened, but if we work together, we can figure something out that works for everyone. What do you mean, Mr. Evans? I'm trying to say that I really care about your wife, Sue. Bill, you're making me uncomfortable. I thought you were going to say something about incest. What do you mean, Ted? I mean, you're saying you have a thing for Sue, like she's your daughter. Ted, you're messing with my head here. What are you saying? What do you mean? Are you saying you like incest? What does that mean? I don't get it. Jeff complied, avoiding eye contact with me. Bob, I wanted to convey that I have great affection for Sue, almost like a daughter. He started to speak when Ted interjected. Are you implying you have a penchant for incest, Mr. Evans? Ted asked, catching him off guard. What are you suggesting? Do I have a fondness for incest? He retorted with indignation. Well, allow me to illustrate. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Ted stated, placing the DVD player on Bill's desk. These are screenshots from the video you're about to watch. He handed them to Jeff, not Bill. Jeff's eyes widened, and he passed them slowly to Bill. The images depicted Bill and Jeff both involved with my wife, leaving no room for doubt about their identities. He fired back, clearly bothered. Let me explain. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? Ted said, putting the DVD player on Bill's desk. These are screenshots from the video you're about to watch. He handed them to Jeff, not Bill. Jeff's eyes widened, and he slowly passed them to Bill. The images showed Bill and Jeff, both involved with my wife, leaving no room for doubt about who they were. Or what they did. I guess you're the one who recorded it and shared it, Bill. What? You recorded it? And you shared it? Bill asked, almost speechless. It was clear that Jeff couldn't respond right away, and he looked totally dumbfounded. Well, Mr. Evans, here's how it's going to go down. Bill, I think you should know that I was the one who recorded the video and shared it. I'm Bobby's attorney and friend, and I'm here to explain what we expect and how we want you to handle it. First, Sue keeps her job, no doubt about it. Bobby thinks she'll be a great asset here, and she fits in well with everyone. He said this, hey, just to be clear, I'm Bobby's lawyer and his buddy, so let me lay out what we're expecting and how we want you to handle it. Tad told the audience, who were pretty shocked, that Sue's keeping her job, and Bobby thinks she'll be a good fit here. He said this to Bill, and he gave a little wink. Second, Mr. Davis is out of the picture. Sue's staying, and he's leaving. Tad said to Bill, pointing at the stunned Jeff. Third, we expect you to make a financial offer that shows you know what's up. We'll think about your first offer and give a yes or no answer within 5 business days. Statement to Bill, along with a wink. Second, Mr. Davis is out of the picture. Sue stays, and he leaves. Tad told Bill, pointing at the shocked Jeff. Third, we expect you to make a financial offer that shows you know what's going on. We'll consider your first offer and give a yes or no answer within 5 business days. We plan to take legal action within 2 months, maybe sooner if we have to, before they could say something. Tad started the video, turning the screen so Bill could see. It showed both men having sex with my wife over and over again in their boardroom. Jeff didn't need to watch, since he was in the video. Bill just watched. We're planning on taking legal action in 2 months, but we might move faster if we have to. Before that, we need to make sure that no one else gets their hands on the video. Tad started playing the video, turning the screen to Bill. It showed both men having sex with my wife over and over again in their boardroom. Jeff didn't need to watch, since he was in the video. Bill just watched, with his mouth open. I could tell he was trying to figure out how to save his business, family life, and, most importantly, money. I knew something was going to happen soon. Jeff, after these guys leave today, we'll need to have a serious talk about your future here. I'll talk to my lawyer to negotiate a settlement that makes everyone happy. With his mouth open, I could tell he was trying to figure out how to save his business, his family life, and, most importantly, his money. I knew he'd be taking action soon. Jeff, after these guys leave today, we'll need to have a serious talk about your future job here. I'll talk to my lawyer to negotiate a settlement that makes you happy. You both get that this info could mess up our business if it got out too soon. Bill said out loud, "Don't worry, Mr. Evans. We'll keep your secret until we get a serious offer from you. But I wouldn't fire Mr. Davis just yet. He might have more copies of the video, which could help. Hey, you two get it, right? If this info gets out too soon, it could mess things up for us. But don't stress, Mr. Evans. We'll keep it on the down low until we get a real offer from you. Still, I'm not going to fire Mr. Davis just yet. He might have some extra copies of the video, and that could give him some power if we don't do something. You and Mr. Davis can sort this out on your own, but just so you know, you might be in legal trouble for hooking up with an employee, which could mess with your job and future opportunities. Tad warned them as we both got up to leave. He grabbed the DVD player and the photos we'd brought. Tad warned them that if we didn't do something, it could mess up their jobs. He told them that if we messed up, Bill and Jeff might get in trouble. I asked him a question, but he told me to be quiet until we were outside. I didn't notice my wife hiding around the corner, trying to listen in on our conversation, but Tad said the last thing he heard was Mr. Evans yelling into Julie's intercom, "Get Sue Thomas here immediately." I grinned. I was pretty sure I was going to get an interesting encounter. Bill would soon find out that I had found his DVD in our home. Once outside, I asked why he had given Jeff an escape route by suggesting he use his own videotape against Bill. Divide and conquer, as they say. Ted explained that it's better if they don't act as a united front, but rather each for themselves. That way, if Bill makes a mistake, each of them can hearted offer to us, we can play them against each other. Tad also noted wisely that Jeff and Bill have families and attend church. Despite their behavior depicted in the videotapes, they're not keen on rocking the familial boat at present. As I departed the building, I realized. It's a shame, but now the place will be remembered as the site where my wife betrayed me, not the respected workplace she used to work at. It was sad to think about what Ted said. Snap me back to reality, all right? Let's grab a beer before our next meetup at the tennis club at 4:00 p.m. We could both use a drink right now, and there's something I need to discuss with you, though I'm not quite sure how yet. Mentioned as we drove across town toward the tennis club that we stopped at a small bar restaurant next to the tennis club. Ted ordered 2 beers and started talking to me. "Bobby, I think Bill Evans will make an offer, but probably for just under $1 million. I'm familiar with. His legal team from another case is really good, and he's a realist. I'll call him tomorrow and tell him that an offer below that amount is not good for his client's business or personal life. I'll say around 3 million or suggest we stop negotiating. He also told me that if the offer is rejected, I have to decide if I should make Susan the main character in the case. His legal team from another case is pretty good. He's also a realist. I'll call him tomorrow and tell him that an offer that's way too low won't be good for his client's business or personal life. I'll suggest about 3 million or that we just forget about the negotiations. He also told me that I need to know if the offer is rejected, I have his permission to make Susan look bad. I won't hold back for anything. My job as your lawyer is to make sure you win in court, even if that means making her look bad. It might get ugly and in the news. I'll use every legal tool we have to win our case. You might not like what you find out about Sue, your marriage, and even your I'm not one to mince words, especially when it comes to the legal details of your case. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you get a win in court. That might include showing a less than flattering side of Sue, your marriage, and even your personal life. I'm not sure if you've thought about the potential revelations that could come out of this. Ted brought up something new at the last minute, saying that he'd thought about it and thought he had more integrity than they gave him credit for. He said that if it came to it, he was ready to go, but he wanted to explore the financial offer first, which he mentioned to Ted. Ted agreed and suggested, Ted, you know I've been thinking about this, and I'm not sure if you've thought about this too. I said that I'd thought about the possibility of there being some kind of scandal, and I think I'm better than people think. I said that if we have to, I'm willing to go ahead with the affair, but I'd like to look at the money first. Ted said that he'd take a look at what Bill has to offer, and if it's not good, he'll deal with all the paperwork right away. He also said that he knows people at 3 local news stations, and they'd be willing to get footage and pictures, even if they have to censor the bad stuff with blue bars, like they do on sitcoms. So, Bill said he'd take care of everything, and if it wasn't good enough, he'd handle the paperwork right away. He also said he'd use his newspaper contacts and friends at 3 local news stations to get footage and images, even if they had to censor the explicit stuff with blue bars, like they do in sitcoms. I've always had your back, Ted, and I trust your judgment. I just wish this whole mess never happened. Being an oblivious husband was more fun than being publicly humiliated by a cheating wife. But you've got my authorization to take whatever actions are necessary. I didn't start this mess, but I'm determined to get it over with soon. I told him, frustrated, Ted, you've always had my back, and I trust your judgment. I just wish this whole mess never happened. Being an oblivious husband was more enjoyable than being publicly humiliated by a cheating wife. But you've got my authorization to take whatever actions are necessary. I didn't initiate this debacle, but I'm determined to conclude it soon. I expressed my frustration in my voice. Understood, Bobby. No problem. Now, let's discuss the material for our next meeting. This guy, Mr. Harry Riel, is the owner of the Ace Tennis Club. This is the guy I pointed out in the video in my office. He's indicated that he'll likely adopt a LA attitude, asserting that adults will be adults, and he won't intervene. Even Tony's tennis coach might be dismissed for appearance's sake only. Bobby, I get it. Now, let's talk about the stuff for our next meeting. This guy, Mr. Harry Riel, is the owner of the Ace Tennis Club. He's the one I mentioned in the video in my office. He said he'll probably be fair and that he won't get involved, even if Tony's tennis coach gets fired. Just to be clear, he might get hired back later. Tony's pretty popular at the club, especially with the women members. Bobby, remember that while men pay the majority of the club dues, women are also stakeholders. This will be important when you talk to Mr. Riel. He told me what was going on. We got there just in time, and it was clear that Mr. Riel and Thad didn't see eye to eye. They were clearly not getting along right away. Tony's pretty popular at the club, especially with the women. Bobby, don't forget that while the guys are the ones paying the bills, the ladies are also part of the club. This is important to keep in mind when you're with Mr. Riel. He told me what was going on. We got there just in time, and it was clear that Mr. Riel and Thad didn't get along. They were basically openly fighting. Mr. Riel told Thad, "This is Bob Thomas," and nodded towards me and my wife. He said that they'd heard that Tony Simba, our tennis instructor, was having an affair with Mr. Thomas's wife. They want to know what you're going to do about it. Tad finished, and he waited for Riel to say something, but even I knew that he would take. Mr. Riel told Thad, "This is Bob Thomas." He nodded toward me and his wife, "Who is a member of your club. We've heard that your tennis instructor, Tony Simba, was having an affair with Mr. Thomas's wife. We want to know what you plan to do about this." Tad finished. He waited for Riel to speak, but even I knew that he would take responsibility for everything. "Listen, what two consenting adults do behind closed doors in their own time is none of my business. Harry Riel informed us, and as for you, Mr. Thomas, if you can't satisfy your wife in the bedroom, don't come to me and blame me if she strays. There are plenty of unhappy spouses who frequent the Ace Tennis Club. Some keep returning everything on his shoulders, and in a few words, send Thad to hell. What two consenting adults do behind closed doors in their own time is none of my business," Harry Riel informed us. "And as for you, Mr. Thomas, if you can't satisfy your wife in the bedroom, don't come to me and blame me if she strays. There are plenty of unhappy spouses who frequent the Ace Tennis Club. Some keep returning for the personalized attention my staff provides them." "For the personalized attention my staff provides them," Harry said, winking at me. Felt the urge to lash out at him, but Ted restrained my wrist and quietly advised me to stay composed and follow his lead. "You see, Harry, you're assuming this occurred outside the club without the owner's knowledge and consent. It's presumptuous of you to make such assumptions," Ted confronted him. Ted pulled out a DVD player and put it on his desk. He pressed play and pointed the screen at Harry. It was clear from Harry's reaction that he didn't like what he saw in the video footage. Ted said, "Harry, you and your colleagues took advantage of a paying member of your club, Mrs. Susan Thomas, a married woman whose dues were." Ted pulled out a DVD player and put it on his desk. He pressed play and pointed the screen at Harry. It was clear from Harry's reaction that he didn't like what he saw in the video footage. Before Harry could say anything, Ted jumped in. He knew what he was doing, and he did it with the help of your colleagues. He took advantage of a paying member of your club, Mrs. Susan Thomas, a married woman whose dues were paid by Mr. Thomas. Now, she's a dissatisfied customer. She told the silent Mr. Riel. When this information surfaces, every man who pays dues will want to know if his wife is doing similar things while he pays for it. I'll have to subpoena everyone who was in the locker room that day. Married men may not be happy with you about this, Ted added, using an almost storytelling tone. Harry Riel, who was pretty much a legal extortionist, said that if we comply, he'll return all the tapes to us and they'll remain confidential. He also said that he'd be willing to fire Tony. Then Ted said that he wanted a substantial offer from us and that we should do it promptly. He said that if we do that, it'll save us a lot of money and hassle. Ted, you're a real piece of work, but I can't argue with your reasoning. Harry Riel, who was pretty much a legal extortionist, said that if we comply, he'll return all the tapes to us and they'll remain confidential. He also said that he'd be willing to fire Tony. Then Ted said that he wanted a substantial offer from us and that we should do it promptly. He said that if we do that, it'll save us a lot of money and hassle. We concluded as we watched Harry Riel thinking about his options. Ted, you're still a bit of a handful, but I can't deny that you're right. I'll hit you up tomorrow with my offer. If I comply, all the tapes will be returned to me and kept confidential. I'll also be happy to fire Tony. Now, if that's all you legal extortionist came for, get the hell out. Harry Riel dismissed us as Ted got his stuff. We finished up by saying that Harry Riel was a tough nut to crack, but we could see his point. Ted said that he'd contact Harry the next day with an offer. If Harry agreed, all the tapes would be returned and kept secret. Ted also said he'd fire Tony right away. Then, Ted took the DVD player and powered it off with a smile. He said, "Oh, and say hi to Tito Martin." Ted told Harry, "Go to hell, Worth." That was all Harry could say. Ted laughed the whole way back to the parking lot. He said that was quite the adventure. Now, we're waiting for suggestions. Tad told me as we went to his house for a tasty homemade dinner. By the end of the week, Bill Evans had offered almost $2.7 million to keep Sue on as his employee. Jeff Davis, after naively handing over all his tapes to Bill Evans, found himself out of a job. Bill simply fired him, leaving poor Jeff with little recourse. I went after the two fools who were with my wife the night I caught her with Jeff. They happened to be two of Jeff's major clients. Neither of them wanted any publicity, whether for their companies or themselves, so each of them offered me $1 million to. Sue's ex, Jeff Davis, got a job with Bill Evans after he gave him all his tapes, but then Bill fired him, so Jeff didn't have much of a chance to fight back. I went after the two guys who were with my wife the night I caught her with Jeff. They were two of Jeff's big clients, and they didn't want any attention either for their companies or themselves. So, they each offered me $1 million to keep quiet. Harry Riel wouldn't offer any money, and he suggested we take legal action. We did that, and in the end, he lost $3 million. A lot of members left his club, and he had to give up owning it. He probably thought he could get away with it, but the judge wasn't impressed with the footage from the private locker rooms or the cheating. I gave Sue a house and a car, just like she wanted, without having. I didn't pay child support. I only saw Sue in court twice. Both times, I greeted her as a strumpet, which made her cry. I thought about why she was crying, but I didn't realize how much she had messed up my life. I made more money than I ever imagined thanks to following Ted's advice, but I still feel the pain from that awful year. I didn't realize anyone was talking to me until I only saw her in court twice, and both times I greeted her as a strumpet, which made her cry. I often wonder why she cried, now that she's not causing such turmoil in my life. I made more money than I ever imagined thanks to following Ted's advice, but the pain still haunts me to this day. All the trials of that dreadful year rushed back in an instant. I hadn't realized anyone was addressing me until I snapped out of my flashback and heard the restaurant manager asking if everything was all right. I was unsure how long I had stood there lost in thought, so I shook my head to clear it and returned to the present. Apologies, just reminiscing about an old issue. Once I saw the group I came to meet, I said, "Thanks again." I explained to the manager, noticing the curious glance he gave, reminiscent of how people regard an elderly person lost in prayer. I made a beeline for my ex. I snapped out of my flashback and heard the restaurant manager asking if everything was all right. I wasn't sure how long I had stood there lost in thought, so I shook my head to clear it and returned to the present. Apologies, just reminiscing about an old issue. Once I saw the group I came to meet, I said, "Thanks again." I explained to the manager, noticing the curious glance he gave, reminiscent of how people regard an elderly person lost in a dream. I made a beeline for my ex-wife's table. The surprise was evident on her face when we last met. I was overweight with long hair and a beard, nursing an old knee injury from baseball. That was my excuse then, but truthfully, I had settled into a complacent life with her. Now I sported a shorter haircut, trimmed from regular workouts, and had my knee repaired thanks to the money from Jeff and Bill's company. My suits were my wife's table. You could see the surprise on her face when we last met. I was overweight with long hair and a beard, and I was dealing with an old knee injury from baseball. That was my excuse back then, but honestly, I had settled into a complacent life with her. Now, I had a shorter haircut, I was trimming it regularly, and I had my knee repaired thanks to the money from Jeff and Bill's company. My suits were now upscale, and I made an effort to look good in public. I decided to speak up first. "You look fantastic today, Strumpet. I almost forgot how stunning you could be." I said that on purpose, wanting to get a reaction. I knew exactly how to push her buttons. "My name is Susan Bobby. Why can't you address me by my name?" She retorted, clearly irritated. "I didn't call you Strumpet. You know who did. I simply find it fitting." I decided to dress nicely for the occasion, and I made an effort to look my best. I decided to speak up first. "You look fantastic today, Strumpet. Almost forgot how stunning you could be." I said, trying to get a reaction. I knew exactly how to push her buttons. My name is Susan. Bobby, why can't you address me by my name? She retorted, clearly irritated. I didn't label you, strumpet. You know who did. I explained, I warned you 3 years ago that you shattered my heart, and I'll always remember you by that title. As the man beside her began to object and rise from his seat, Sue urged him to remain calm. Tears welled up, smudging her makeup. Her boyfriend interjected, go freshen up, Sue. Fix your face. I'll handle this idiot for you. With those words, she stood, locking eyes with me as I reciprocated with a single. I told you 3 years ago that you broke my heart, and I'll always remember you that way. I said as the guy next to her started to object and get up from his seat, but Sue told him to stay calm. Tears welled up, smudging her makeup. Her boyfriend said, go freshen up, Sue. Fix your face. I'll handle this idiot for you. With those words, she looked at me, and I looked back, maybe showing how much I'd been hurting for 3 years. Her tears flowed harder, surprising me that she still felt anything for me, or maybe it was just lingering guilt, probably a mix of both. I expect you to be gone when I return, she said, crying, heading to the restroom. I noticed the big engagement ring on her finger as she wiped her eyes and left. You must be Bob Thomas, Jr. X. She looked up, and I could see that she was crying. She said that she'd been feeling this way for 3 years. Her tears were coming down more quickly, and I was surprised that she still felt anything for me. Maybe she was feeling guilty, or maybe it was a little of both. I think you should be gone when I get back, she said, crying, and went to the bathroom. I saw the big engagement ring on her finger when she wiped her eyes and left. You must be Bob Thomas, her husband, he said, sounding annoyed. And you must be the new guy she's been dreaming of. I replied, feeling his anger. I'm Sue, the CFO, and if I were you, I'd stop using that term, he said, but he didn't seem interested in causing a scene. I just wanted to talk to you privately. I have 3 questions, and then I'll disappear from your life forever, I told him, and he looked confused. I've been in your shoes before, and I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through. I guess the woman painted me as a lousy husband, abusive, neglectful, or a womanizer. I said, knowing exactly what she told him, but I'm not here to save my reputation in your eyes, honestly. I doubt it serves any purpose. First off, does Sarah still host her Avon gatherings at her place on Tuesdays and Thursdays? I asked. Sue assists Sarah with her decor sales on Mondays and Wednesdays. It seems your memory is a bit faulty. He snapped back. All right, then does she still take tennis? Sue, I'm giving lessons on Saturdays. I pressed. Sue, you seem to have a hazy recollection. For someone married to her for so long, he remarked triumphantly. All right, final question, have you ever checked under the bottom drawer of the dresser in your living room? I asked, hurriedly, no, why would I even do that? He protested, the 3 questions I posed to you are the reasons why we're no longer together. I still have all the leftover divorce paperwork in my office, legal documents, emails from Sarah. I've had these with me for years. I thought you should have them. I explained that I had retrieved a worn and folded piece of paper from my wallet. This is what the other woman wrote to Sarah when she asked how to get rid of me before I discovered her infidelity. I read that letter. I realized I didn't know her at all, and probably still don't. But it all revolves around you. I handed him the paper, however. I knew Sue very well. I totally get her compulsive habits. She always follows the same routine, down to a T. Sometimes it drives me nuts. I also had a feeling that even with a new guy, she'd stick to her old ways. I elaborated, and he seemed hesitant to accept the paper, but curiosity got the better of him. He reached over and opened the email. I've had it for 3 years, occasionally rereading it and striving to better myself so that no woman would ever write such things about me again. Of all the evidence, that email hit me. I've kept it with me because it's the hardest. It's the same email I mentioned earlier in my story. Peter read the letter slowly and set it down on the table. He grabbed a pen and scribbled a note on it, then abruptly left the restaurant. No glance back, "No, thanks, nothing." His expression remained impassive. I leaned over to see what he had written on the old email. "I'll return home shortly. Please wait here, and I'll call you in 15 minutes. I need to check under the bottom drawer of my—" "Hey, Peter, I'll be right back." I kind of felt like he'd figured it out, even if he wasn't too happy about it. I had a feeling I'd hit a nerve on all three topics. The email seemed to be the last straw, and he needed to check it out himself. I left a note on Sue's table. There was no way I'd stick around with anyone tonight. Back in the foyer, I gave my client a call. They didn't mind rescheduling the meeting, since they were running late anyway. Before leaving, I took a quick look. Sue was back at the table, looking for Peter. She noticed her old email and Peter's note. Her face went pale when she read the email. "The last time I saw my wife, she was sobbing so hard that the whole restaurant turned to look. I felt bad for her, but I didn't care. That was the last time I saw her. I still wonder if Peter found something under the dresser drawer." Sue's tears made me think he might have.